And then you can all, by continuing to be in the meeting, you're consenting to be recorded. Gotcha. So everybody, welcome to this webinar with CCAR called Spill the Tea, RCO Administration. Hey, Jolie.
Yes.
When Stacy, you guys wanted to name this Spill the Tea, what is that? I mean, I don't even know what that is. I have tea. Am I supposed to spill it? I can't really see it with my CCAR thing. Spill my tea.
So spill the tea is more along the lines of, giving people the 411, the information, what's the gossip, what's the latest, thing going on. So that's what the spill the tea reference comes in.
I wonder if I use that with my kids, if they would just look at me. Well, they do that anyway, so I guess that's irrelevant. So hello, everyone. My name is Phil Valentine. Maybe for purposes of this webinar, you could call me DJ Right Click. It's becoming my new name, DJ Right Click. I am a person in long-term recovery. My recovery was established in December of 1987. So that's like I'm going into my 34th year of recovery. I started working at CCAR in January of 1999. So in January, that was 22 years. And I've been the executive director since 2004 and have been with CCAR since the beginning. CCAR stands for the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery. And we have built an organization, and I had a lot of help. And one of those people that helped me the most was Miss Yolibel Lebrón, who's going to introduce herself now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yolibel Lebrón. I also go by Jolie. I started at CCAR back in May of 2002. And I was actually the 7th or 8th staff member at the time. When I first started working at CCAR, I didn't know anything about recovery, didn't know what recovery looked like, what it was, because I grew up around addiction. My father was an alcoholic. And I also have family members that are in active addiction as well. So I knew a lot about addiction, but nothing about recovery. So when I started working at CCAR, I became knowledgeable and educated on what recovery is and what recovery looks like. And I'm happy to say that my dad has been 10 plus years sober, and I'm truly grateful for that. And we're here to share, we're going to spill the tea on RCO administration, what that is, how to incorporate it into your organization as well. And full disclosure, I am no expert. I'm just sharing my experience and lessons that I've learned working here at CCAR.
Well, I disagree with you already. I do believe you're an expert, but I understand you had to put that disclaimer in there. Excuse me, the tea's going down not well. Julie, how long ago did we start talking about this idea of sharing some of the lessons we've learned about our RCO development?
Many years ago. I want to say 2, maybe 3 years ago, we've been talking about this. We have a lot of information that we want to put into webinars and just share it out there with everyone.
And Stacy, you can go to the next slide, please. So I have often talked about the foundation of our organization being the administrative block, if you will, and I've evolved lately into thinking about our organizational structure as a tree. And if you will, the foundation would be the roots, and the roots grow in what? Soil. And so soil is really about your organizational culture. And if you have a really positive, nurturing, caring, challenging at times organizational culture, you'll have really strong roots and they support one another. And if you look at the next, anything you want to say about how you see administration as the foundation, Jolie?
Yeah, so I see administration as a solid, foundation for the organization. So it equals to having a strong foundation for all recovery support services.
Mhm.
So having a solid administrative foundation, you're able to support staff members in order to be successful in their roles, and they will be well equipped in going out there and providing those services.
Hey, so look at our slides are magically advancing all by themselves. Oh, and then they went, there we go. So today, what is it we want to cover? We want to cover some basic administration policies, and then we want to talk about human resources and some other focus points. So under administration, you're going to hear about how important it was for us to get nonprofit status, and then talk about some of the tax filings we have and the importance of some of the insurances. Jolie, take the next little block there.
Yeah, so for human resources, we're gonna talk about some of the employee policies and procedures that we have in place, our hiring practices, what we do here at CCAR, and performance appraisals.
And then the last one, and all of these have been barriers for many RCOs. And so you can, as much as I can say and share, I've been in a recovery community organization for 22 years. So I've seen a lot of things that don't work, and I'm also willing to share those. And I've seen a lot of things that have worked. One of the things that you will see in a recovery community organization prominent in a lot of areas, then they disappear. And it's usually a large majority of the time because of misappropriation of funds. It has to do with finances. So that's why we're going to stress that point. Technology we'll talk more about, and some of our data systems as well. So is everybody clear on where we're going just for today's webinar and session? And feel free to raise your hand. You can go below and raise your virtual hand if you have a question, or type something in the chat. And Jolie and myself will be monitoring that. And also Stacy Charpentier is behind the scenes producing. I guess she's Stacy Charpentier, but you know, I like to have a little fun, right? Stacy Charpentier sounds really cool, doesn't it, Stacy? She's not going to respond.
I had to find the mute unmute button.
Oh, I know, because it is your first Zoom meeting, I'm sure.
No, because it's at the top of the screen with when I'm the producer. So yes, I love the way that Charpentier makes me sound so sophisticated with it, which we know is far from.
Anything with logistics that you want to cover before we dive in?
No, I think, you know, we have a small enough group. I think people who are on this Zoom meeting are all pretty familiar with you and your facilitation style. So they know that you'll call on them when they least expect it. So
well, I don't know if I'll do that. We'll see. All right, so let's dive in, and we'll go into our big first number one bullet. The next slide, please, which is CCAR administration. And in the chat box, just quickly, how would you define administration? Just define it for me. And you can put that in the chat box. What do you see? Why are we focusing, and why do we have a director of administration? What is it? Ooh, yeah, operations, policy, procedures, correct? Yeah. Day-to-day processes, usually repeated, set standards, guides to operations. The people. Wow, that's good. the controls that you place on a business organization that ensures the company's goals are met, laws are stayed within, and innovation happens. Yeah, that's a great definition. I'm very old school. Mine comes down to one word. It was like paperwork. So much paperwork and things you have to do, and roles and responsibilities, carrying out daily operations of the agency will keep it maintained in legal, state, and U.S. business compliance. Wow. Yeah, that's true, Tammy, and that's a lot. Legal, state, and U.S. business compliance. So, Julie, I'm going to have you just kind of briefly run through the next slide and see if there's any questions or anything you want to add.
Okay. So all those responses are actually correct. Administration has to do with all of that. So the big one is the IRS filing. So just making sure if you're a startup organization and you want, to file as a nonprofit, your nonprofit status as a 501c3, you have to file with the IRS. It could be very cumbersome. It could be time consuming, but the thing is just to stick through it. You can do it online. You have any questions, do the chat box, contact them with a phone, but stay with it. It will happen if you're consistent with it. That's how you get your nonprofit 501c3 status. Form 990. So we have an annual audit that gets conducted every year, and we also have tax returns. That's what the Form 990 is. So that is a public document that we have, and we, have to share it with anyone who wants to do business with us and wants to see that. So that is the 990 tax return that we have available as well. State filing. Every year we have to file with the state. It's called the annual business filing. So it's basically just certifying that we are a legitimate company. We are in good standing. We're still operating in the state of Connecticut. So that is another, form that we fill out every year, which lets people know that we are, we're legit. We have a good reputation, and many vendors and contractors, even state agencies, go through the state site to look us up just to make sure that we are a legitimate company or legitimate business, that they can conduct business with us. So that's very important to stay on top of that form and file it every year.
I'll jump in here.
Yep.
And when I was hired in 1999, Bob Savage was our co-founder, and we had not received 501c3 status yet. So in order for us to start, we had to find an agency that had 501c3, and they served as our fiduciary. And then we did apply, and the paperwork was cumbersome, much as Jolie has said. And you can see our Form 990s on our website. And we have since done all the paperwork for state filing and all that. So I mean, I see Khalees and Neetha, they're over in England. I'm sure they have a similar process. It's called what? It's a NGO. Is that it there? Yeah.
So you can either apply to be a fully charitable status, or what we've set up as is a community interest company, which allows us to operate like a limited company, but still apply for grants and fundings as long as it has a community interest. But yeah, I just hired an accountant this week. So wow. We are moving up in the world and getting somebody to help.
So part of that is, how much of that did you know before you started, or how much did you have to research and get help with?
I had knowledge from running a hotel hospitality business of the kind of amount of paperwork.
Yeah.
But putting it into a community interest company, it just makes you think differently. So instead of everything coming out to make profit for the stakeholders, everything we have to prove is how it benefits the community.
Got it.
So every line has to have a community interest.
Thank you. Yeah, so Julie, we're at insurances.
Yes.
And so when Bob started, he was literally just working out of his bedroom to see if the recovery community could be organized. and we had nothing. And we brought in an administrative assistant, Pat Howard, who Jolie worked for. And one of the, I think, do you remember when we started putting in some of these insurances, and talk about what they are?
Yeah, so it was very early on. I guess you guys were researching different brokers and different type of, insurance companies and policies. And, we got the commercial insurance in place. We have, additional insurances. But throughout the years, as we've expanded, what we found is that we weren't really getting the attention that we deserved from our broker at that time. So we switched to a different broker, a different company, and they actually found, the right insurance for us that was for nonprofits. So, a lot of insurances out there, because we're a nonprofit, we're not treatment. We don't do outpatient services. They try to put you in a box or in a specific category. We don't match any of those boxes. So we were lucky enough to find, and the name is actually Nonprofit Insurance Alliance. They're based out of California. And we have our commercial insurance and all the insurances that we need through them, because they deal specifically with nonprofits. So you want to make sure that whoever you are working with is there to, fit the needs that you have in your organization.
Next, we get some of these reporting requirements from funders. And our primary funder when we started was the Connecticut Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, which is a public agency. So they had funding requirements and reporting requirements. So early on, I got assigned the task of writing these quarterly reports for DEMIS, which would be very comprehensive, talk about everything we've done. And I spent 3, 4, 5 years writing these reports every quarter. And DEMIS ultimately came to us and said, well, nobody's reading these reports, so you don't need to do them anymore. But it's still a requirement of the funder. And now they just have us, they give us our grant money, and we have to submit an 8-month financial report and then a year-end financial report. And it's pretty comprehensive. The form is not easy to walk through, of course, as you might well imagine. But every funder, and as we expanded, we got federal funding from the federal government, obviously, and their reporting requirements were even more stringent. And every time you get funding, unless you're kind of promoting or getting funding from private individuals, and some of them might even have reporting requirements, you have to be very diligent about what's required from the money you receive and how you report that. And we have to conduct ourselves right as a brand new nonprofit. As recovery community organizations emerge, we have to do it with respect, integrity, gratitude, and finally, we have to be completely honest, and we have to be completely transparent. I mean, back in the 20 years ago, DEMIS would mail us checks, and that's how long I've been doing this. So you would get a check, and it would be like $80,000. Now, I'm not completely well now. Can you imagine what I was like 20 years ago? So I would think about what could I do with that $80,000? And there's temptation to do things, but they quickly passed. But again, there's been many recovery community organization leaders in the past that have fallen prey to the temptation and done things that they shouldn't have done with the money. And that has the damage to the potential to damage the entire recovery community movement. So just think about that.
Yeah, one thing to add, Phil, with the reporting requirements, that now mostly everything is done online. So you have to make sure that you have the proper credentials in place, that you have a contact person in case you can't log in to the site, because that has happened to us in the past. And you have to change your password every 3 months and things like that. So you really want to make sure that you bookmark that page. You have the contact person in case you have any issues to reach out to if you have issues logging in, and any questions and the type of reports that need to be submitted, or even assistance in navigating the site. So make sure you have all that information with you before filing.
And Jolie, Neitha asks in the chat box, you see her question?
Do you have to have insurance for your coaches? Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah. So the question is, do you have to have insurance for your recovery coaches? If so, what kind of insurance? So that's really good because most of our coaches work remotely in the hospital settings. We have other coaches that are starting to go into the prison facilities. So the type of insurance that we have covers our remote workers. And then we also add those facilities or those hospitals as additional insured under our policy, just in case. So that would be yes.
So what type of insurance is it though?
Well, usually we have to do like a certificate of insurance or a certificate of liability that will
Right.
list the additional facility.
Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily for like a coaching practice insurance. It's just a general liability insurance.
Yep, they're right under our commercial insurance. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Got
Good
it.
question.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So you know about as we've grown over the last years, and Jolie's been with us. You said earlier it's 19 years now. How have you seen the bottom bullet with with supplies, inventory, maintenance, and stuff? How has that changed?
So yeah, so we went from 7 staff when I first got hired. Now we're at 53, with many centers, and programming. So the additional duties of just even ordering supplies, that's a big task, right? Ordering supplies for 4 to 5 centers, and keeping track of that. Keeping track of inventory, all of our purchases, all of our equipment, not only for financial purposes, but also for insurance purposes, just to make sure that we have the right amount of insurance coverage for our equipment. So that's a task in itself, managing that, and maintenance. The maintenance of all of our sites. Something breaks down, who's in charge of that? Who do you contact for that? There's one building that we own. So whenever something breaks down, we all cringe because we're like, what do we do? Like, we're in charge of it, it falls on us to figure that out. So we have a very good administrative team here that handles all of those, those additional duties, and they maintain all of that.
Any questions so far? We're doing okay? All right. Next slide, please. So when I took over in 2004 as executive director, CCAR employees, basically for the first 5 years, had no benefits at all. Not even like we just got a salary. There was no health insurance. There was no mileage. There was nothing, and there was no guidelines on what it meant to be an employee. So one of the first people I sought was a consultant to help me write a personnel policies and procedures. And I had never seen one. I didn't really know what one was. And she did an incredible job and walked us through it. And the bones of that are still very much functional today and still pertinent. So we're going to run through that a little bit with you, and I'll let Jolie do some of that. But here are some of the key components. And the next slide, please.
So some of the key components, as you can see in the first bullet, employee conduct and work rules. So you want to make sure you have a policy regarding that. For here at CCAR, we have our, code of conducts or code of ethics, which kind of goes into what are the expectations, for us here in the organization. Another one is, and I'm just going to read it right off of here. It is the responsibility of all employees to provide excellent job performance and to conduct themselves in the highest standards of courtesy, sensitivity, and respect. So it's laid out there, black and white, that is what's our responsibilities as employees, and how we conduct ourselves in the work environment.
Any of those other things you want to talk about, and you don't have to go through them all, but
Yep. So attendance and punctuality, that's an important policy to have. It's regular and punctual attendance. It's a condition of employment. So due to staffing and how it can impact services, and programming, you want to make sure that staff are scheduled, show up to work when on time and when they are scheduled to work.
Right.
So that's pretty self-explanatory in itself. Employee dress and appearance, we always say here at CCAR, we are representatives of CCAR. We represent the recovery community. We need to make sure that, we are dressed appropriately, casual business attire, and we are ready to work. Drug-free workplace. Can you believe we need to have a policy on that? Yes. You want to make sure you have a clear policy when it comes to a drug-free workplace. Conflicts of interest, that's another one. Employees should not improperly use their position in order to benefit themselves, friends, relatives, or other businesses. They shouldn't use their position as working at CCAR to try to gain, something else from another organization that we may conduct business with, or that may be a competitor. So that's another important one to have in place. Leaves of absence, there's many different types of leave of absence, from military leave to administrative leave, to workers' compensation leave. So you want to make sure you have policies on that describe what they are. Hiring of relatives. Phil, do you want to take that one?
Why did she look to me for that one? I'm not quite sure. Yeah, also, we have seen other recovery community organizations, my involvement nationally and with the Recovery Community Services Program over the years, where I've actually seen the executive director hire their wife as CEO. That didn't turn out too well. And a lot of times, and we have some national organizations in already that never seem to post for a job. And the next thing you know, they've just hired somebody. And it seems to me it's oftentimes like the friends or acquaintances or a colleague or somebody that just seems to get hired. And we will talk more about that. But the hiring of relatives really is for organizational health. And there are just too many issues when you start, and I'm looking at Neetha and Khalees and they're going, oh shit. No, I'm just kidding. But it's how you work that out and figure it out. But if you found a company, it's a little different. And you just have to know what your policy is. So we're just saying you ought to have a policy on the hiring of relatives. In most places, in most circumstances, it's recommended that you do not. And if you happen to, then that relative must report to somebody else, so that kind of thing.
Yeah, and for the purpose of this policy, relatives also include sponsor and sponsee relationships as well.
And that's also comes from experience that we needed to add that.
Yeah. Okay, so employee discipline. So you want to make sure you have a process in place when it comes to employee discipline. I like to say like corrective action instead. But you just want to make sure it's clear, it's laid out. Here at CCAR, we always start off with coaching, right? You want to coach someone, and coaching is not a form of discipline. It's just coaching. And again, it's a case by case. It depends if it's a major violation or not. You know, you may not do coaching if it's a major violation. It just may go straight to a final warning or even termination. But you want to make sure that you have a process laid out.
And so a couple stories, like the drug-free workplace is standard for nonprofits. And my research has shown that if somebody that you know is in recovery, say from alcoholism, and they have a slip on the weekend and they drink, I do not have cause to fire that person. I cannot legally do that. And I've gotten to a lot of discussions over other places with other places that say, well, he said he was in recovery. That was a condition of his employment. He drank again, he's gone. And we have taken a different approach that if we don't understand relapse and all that, and it depends on a lot of factors, but anytime we would make a decision to terminate would be based on performance or a major shift in like our organizational structure. Those have been like the only two times or the only times that we would really do anything like that. Also, as far as employee discipline goes, we have the whole procedure laid out. It's pretty clear, but there are minor violations and there are major violations, and major violations are a cause for termination. There was a time back, probably in 2004, 2005, where I had to let an employee go. We ended up getting sued. I ended up in court. I ended up being deposed. I mean, literally, I was 4 days, over 30 hours of being deposed, pages and pages. And our attorney said something interesting about documentation. Documentation is a two-edged sword. So if you document everything and lay out a perfect case, you have made everything that you have ever written open to interpretation and investigation and questioning. So we had an incredible paper trail and documentation of it all. And the attorney has also often been in other cases where there is minimal documentation, and that became a case of, you know, he said, she said, or whatever, that it was an employee against the employer and just word of mouth. So state of the art is when you're doing discipline is to document and just to keep a record of that. Just be aware that as you document things, imagine if that went before an attorney that wasn't necessarily a fan of yours and wanted to question you on it. Can you accurately answer and honestly answer all those questions? And just be aware of that when you're providing documentation, especially in regards to discipline.
Right. And you also want to make sure when you're documenting that it's objective,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because if it does end up in court, you know, you want to be able to explain it.
You
So,
can't use a lot of adjectives, you know, like you just can base it on what you've seen or others experience, what you've experienced. You can't assume what people were thinking. You can't do any of that. Make sense? So the other thing that we offer, how many people here have an employee personnel policies and procedures? Raise your hand, thumbs up. And we have shared ours with other agencies as a template if people want to use that. So if you do, you can put it in the chat box, or I think I'll put Jolie's email address in there. So you can email Jolie. She loves it when I do that. So if you request some of these documents for purposes of this webinar.
yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Any questions? We're going to go into hiring practices and performance appraisals. But does anybody have any questions overall about employee policies and procedures? All right. Jolie, you have Jolie, when you came into this, how much background did you have in HR and how did you get so involved in HR?
So when I first got hired, I had zero background in HR, right? And then working closely with Pat Howard, she was the office manager at the time. And as we continued to expand in services and staff, we found that was a need. And it was actually something that I was interested in. So I decided to enroll in like a HR management program and enjoyed it, completely enjoyed it, fell in love with HR. And that's where I learned how to do this, hiring process. And I've been actually tweaking it, throughout the years. So with the hiring practices, you first have to assess the need, right? You're not just going to make up a job description or make up a role just because you want to hire for a specific role. You have to really find out if it's needed in the organization. So you assess the need, then you develop the job description. Once you develop the job description, you want to work on your job posting. Once you do your job posting, you want to figure out how are you going to promote it? Where is it going to get posted? You want to make sure that you don't leave anyone out. So you make it where people are able to apply online or apply via mail or in person or even via fax. You want to make it easy for folks to apply for the position. Typically, we leave the job posting out for 4 weeks because we want to make sure that it goes out there and we want to get as many applicants as possible. And once the job closes, we review the application. Now, the way we review applications is not typical to other agencies. So when the applications get to us, we don't know who applies because we review them blind. So meaning the names are covered, even their addresses and everything. And so all we're getting is a cover letter and a resume. That's all. We don't know who's applying. So this way we take any of our biases out of it and we just focus on the skills and the experience. Once we review the applications, we figure out who the interview team is going to be. So we always interview in teams. It's not just HR doing the interview. It's just not HR and a man. So typically it's HR, the manager, and another person, 2 to 3 people. They're part of the interview process. We select the candidates for the initial screening. So the initial screening, it's a phone call that we make and we have, questions in place. So we do that over the phone. We review that again, the interview team, and, based on the responses, we'll figure out, okay, yes, this person's going to come in for an interview, or no, this person, they didn't answer the questions very well. There's a couple of red flags the way they answered these. We're not going to bring them in. So then we decide who to bring in for a first round interview. And typically first round interview, your generic questions, such as, why are you interested in this position? Why are you the best candidate for this role? Why should we hire you? Things like that. Once we do the first round interviews, depending how many people we see, we meet again and decide who we bring back for second round interviews. So you may be thinking, this is a long process. Why don't you just hire after the first interview? So I learned you never hire after the first interview. I had an HR professional tell me that. You want to do second interviews. Reason being, your second interviews are more scenario based. So it really has to do with the role that that person is applying for. You put them in different situations to see their way of thinking, see how they would answer, certain questions, and they're put in those scenarios. And it tells you a lot. It really tells you a lot, the second round. After second round, if there's anyone that rises to the top, you make the offer. Well, actually, no, before you make the offer, we got to run the background checks. We got to do references. We always do references. We do employment verifications. And then going back to the background check, if someone has a criminal record, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing and they're out and we're not going to hire them. Typically here at CCAR, what we say is that's actually your resume. That is a good thing. That is what we're looking for, right?
Mhm.
So once all that checks out, we make the job offer. Once the applicant accepts, we do the orientation and onboarding. So orientation, you're bringing them on board, you're getting them trained, you're getting to, them familiar into the, the CCAR culture. And then onboarding is continuously, right? Onboarding is kind of like the first 6 months of their employment. You don't forget about the applicant. You don't forget about this new hire. You continue to work with them throughout the first 6 months of their employment. Then there's the 90-day evaluation period. They have 90 days to prove that they're a fit for this role. And once they're in the role, they get to see what the role entails, and they really get to see, is this really what I want to do? So that happens after the 90 days. And then once they successfully complete that 90-day probationary period, the next one is the annual performance appraisals. So, everyone here has performance appraisals every year, typically the month of hire, or at least within 30 days of their month of hire. And I've heard of other agencies that they typically don't do performance appraisals, or they do it every couple years. But here at CCAR, we believe that is important, and we do them annually.
So you can see, it's apparent to me that it's a sifting process, right? That people have to go through a rigorous process, and anywhere along this, you might not pass. You might not get your application through. You might not pass the initial screen, or the first interview, or the second interview. We've had people drop out when they didn't give us adequate references, and we've had people that didn't accept the job offer and took another job. So we've had them drop out all along there. So the point, by the time you are hired and start orientation and onboarding, we've already made a significant investment in time in you. And so we always believe that when you hire, we trust you until you give us a reason not to. We don't fire anyone. You fire yourselves. And I will say this because it's the best way, I think, to put people through this process. And you can see there's no place in here like family member drops in here and goes straight to the scenario based. That just doesn't happen. Anybody has to go all the way through all of this in order to get hired here. Any thoughts or questions? Khalees asks, how do we do an annual performance appraisal?
Good question, Khalees. So I don't know if Stacy, if you have a performance appraisal template in handy that you can share. If not, that's okay.
But we have the next. Do you want to go through the next slide to kind of show it?
Sure. Is that the next bullet?
It's performance appraisals.
Oh, perfect. Look at that.
All right. Thank you, Khalees.
Yeah. So each staff member has their own, performance appraisal. So for every role, we have a specific performance appraisal with different categories and a scoring system for each of the categories. And what we do is the staff member does their own self-appraisal, and then the supervisor or manager will do their own, appraisal or evaluation of the staff member. And then they set up a time to meet, and they, meet and discuss, what they have. And so that's how we conduct them. Weekly reports. So each staff member also has weekly reports. There's a weekly reporting template. And the good thing is that the weekly reporting template matches your performance appraisal. So each of the categories on the weekly reports, which staff report on every week, it's on the performance appraisal, which is great because when it comes time to do your own self-appraisal, you already have 52 weeks of reports done already, and you could kind of take out the highlights and incorporate that into your performance appraisal. Look at that. Thank you, Stacy. She just added one on the chat box. So that's the, you're welcome. So that's the template. Regular check-in meetings. So what we like to say is, you don't meet with a staff member only once a year to discuss their performance appraisal, any issues with their performance. This should be an ongoing conversation discussed in regular check-in meetings. It should have come to a surprise, to anyone, to the staff member that they're having issues. It shouldn't be the first time they hear about it. So we definitely recommend regular check-in meetings with staff members, just so you're on the same page, you could stay connected, and you're able to provide any support if needed in their role. Let's see, employee self-evaluation. Yep, so that's part of the performance appraisal. Phil, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, so for many years, we kind of just tried to be as generous as we could with increases and raises with people. And then as we got bigger, we came to a point where we brought in some HR consultants that really classified all the jobs. And based on, what is FLSA again, Jolie?
That is Fair Labor Standards Act.
Right. So these are all job descriptions. And now that we were able to set some certain metrics, so based on the score you get in your performance appraisal, you're eligible for a certain amount of a certain percentage increase to your salary annually. And I try to build that into budget. So I think for the last several years, we've been fortunate enough to not only offer increases based on merit, but everyone gets an increase. No matter what your score is, you will get an increase. It just might not be the same percentage as if you had a higher score. And we're also able to improve our benefits for people as well. So it's all fair, and it's all measured on, it's why it's called a merit compensation tool. So, and those you can look up. And it took a little while for us to understand how to use everything and work everything. But once we did, it's the same for everyone across the board. So it makes it easier for us. And it's fair.
Yes, it is. Yes, we were very fortunate, as Phil mentioned, to work with a consultant that does this for a living. So he came in, he evaluated all of our job descriptions and compared it with other agencies, government agencies, other nonprofits, state agencies, and came up with the range and the market average for the entire organization. And he came up with a merit tool. And what was great about it is that he says that we pay employees above market average, which is huge, especially for a nonprofit. So we're really proud about that.
Yeah, and the market also included for-profit enterprises. So it was the market in general. So yeah, we are proud about that. If we don't pay people in recovery well, who will?
Absolutely.
So Stacy, can I share my screen for a second? And let me see if I can do that. Share my
I'm
screen.
like, you can do whatever you'd like.
I
Phil.
can? Cool.
Yes.
So share. You guys see, can you see that? It says human resources, CCAR share. So I just wanted to give you a quick what our behind the scenes look. So if you go here, you can see like all our benefits, correspondence, all this. So if you go down here to performance appraisals, then you can see all our performance appraisals for all these years, just to show that we're not just blowing smoke. So here's 2020, and these are all our performance appraisals, right? And then when you go to, we have new templates, or maybe those are, well, let's go to current templates, Philip. Current performance appraisal templates. So you can see all our templates for all our jobs. So we can look, and this is all, let's see if we have a senior program manager, if this is the template. He oversees all the recovery community centers. So we have the major tasks and duties here, the scoring and how we'd weight that. And then these get really filled. So these can be sometimes 4, 5, 6 pages long with comments, accomplishments, goals, and sign off for all of that. So does anybody have any questions with that? I just wanted to show you a little bit behind the scenes, and this is how we've built our system over the years.
Yeah, and Phil, I could just mention that once the performance appraisals are done and signed off by the manager and the employee, Phil reviews each and every performance appraisal because that's really important. If he's going to sign it, he needs to make sure that he's, you know, accepting the way it's written. And there are times that Phil will have to send it back because there's too many subjective, you know, language on it. So you want to make sure that even when you're doing performance appraisals, that is objective.
I had a possible observation, if I might.
Sure.
What I heard you saying, Phil, is that the emphasis in these the appraisals is really strengths-based. I am picking that up right, am I?
Yes, oh, definitely. Thank you for picking that up.
Which is, of course, so completely aligned with everything else that we do. You know, it is our model. So I just wanted to clarify that and to congratulate you on that.
Thank you.
That's not necessarily the way that many folks approach job appraisals, or indeed the whole issue of supervision generally. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we want to catch people doing things right, instead of like catching them from doing things wrong. And the other part of that is every employee fills this out themselves. And so they have, and then the supervisor fills it out as well. And then there's a conversation and negotiation and it's, I find them usually quite rewarding to be able to do that. All right, where are we going next? We need to get our PowerPoint back up. Otherwise, we're lost without it, right, Jolie? You
We
guys
are
doing all right?
lost.
Where you guys can stretch a little bit. And anybody have any other questions or comments about performance appraisals? All right. Joanna gave us the thumbs up, so I think that's a good thing. All right, let's move on to our last big areas that we were just going to touch on, some focus points. Oh my goodness. So the big first focus point is in the realm of finances, okay? And I firmly believe in, Stacy, you can scroll all the way through of it, but I firmly believe that, like I said earlier, finances are the thing that will bring down an agency faster than anything. And there's no doubt about that because, you know, and the board of directors, they have two responsibilities: governance, which is kind of making sure we stick to mission and vision, and fiduciary is to check the money. You know, they have to follow the money. It has to be spent appropriately. So there's all kinds of things that we do to make sure that's taken care of. We just recently hired a director of finance, and I am so grateful that we did because we were trying to contract out for some services and we weren't getting the service that we needed and the attention we needed. And we hired someone that's really skilled, and in the month that she's been there, she's done a lot, but her primary function is to track revenue and track expense and make sure we're spending it according to contract requirements and we're spending it appropriately. As an example, you know, she's already had questions about like staff expenses, mileage, other things which are completely appropriate. And just to tighten it up, rein it in, we can still be generous. We can still err on the side of the employee, but we need to have really good controls with the money. So we have a financial policies and procedures. We have a cost allocation plan. We try to get the latest in accounting software, and we have to conduct annual audits well, that's why it's called annual. So we have to conduct an audit every year, which is really a trying and rigorous process. And with the exception of 1 year where we experienced some rapid growth and some auditor and accountant difficulties, let's say, we have received perfectly clean audits over the 20 plus years I've been here. And we share that openly. And that's really a construct of recovery, to be honest and transparent, especially with finances. And that's one of the reasons, as you establish that reputation, that funders will invest in you. They know you're reliable and they know you're dependable. And if you don't have these audits or able to show how you account for your finances, your chances of winning a grant or earning the trust of a public funder are limited. Make sense? So you always have to look at your finances and how well you have control over it. And frankly, our biggest challenge lately has been that we've grown so much and have so many revenue streams, it was hard for us to track and keep managing, which is a great problem to have. And I guess the last visual I will give for financial health came from Don Coyes from White Bison. And we were at an RCSP meeting, probably 2006, 2007, something like that. And we were talking about sustainability. That was always the federal word, sustainability. And Don just said, well, you know, when I was in the mountains in Colorado, and I was looking at this mountain lake, and all the streams were running in to feed this mountain lake. And I could see 4 or 5 different streams. And it occurred to me, if one of those streams dried up, that the other 4 would still feed the reservoir of water. And that's how I think of sustainability for my organization, is the diversification of funding, that you need multiple revenue streams. And so probably when it's probably like 7, 8 years ago, we were like at 80 to 90% public funding. And now we're below 60% public funding, although our public funding has probably tripled. So did you follow that? Even though the pie's gotten a lot bigger, the section of pie that was public funding has shrunk, even though that has grown. So that's also an important lesson for recovery community organizations, multiple funding streams. And they don't have to be all huge dynamic ones, but the more you have coming in, the better. That's also what they say is the essence for households, for your personal finances, that if you can have multiple revenue streams, you're going to be much better off. If one of them goes away, you have other ones that you can rely on. Exactly. Multiple pathways for funding. Perfect, Neetha. You check the box, we can move on, right? Unless you have any questions about finances. And I think one of the gifts I've had is the ability to see different ways to generate revenue for the agency. I often think of myself as like, I'm fishing on the front of a boat, right? And I'm catching these fish, and I love catching the fish, and I throw them over my shoulder, and I just leave them for Jolie and her team to process because I don't want to clean the fish or deal with them. I just throw them over my shoulder and go, here's another one, here's another one. And poor Rebecca is like, okay, here's another grant. Now she has to figure out how we're going to do it.
So Phil, going back real quickly to financial policies and procedures,
Sure.
I can't reiterate how important that is to have in place. Especially, having all your files organized, having some organizational process in place where you're keeping track of the invoices and income that's coming in, and even hard copies of things, just filing those accurately. Because when it comes time for your annual audit, the auditors are going to ask for all of that information, and you want to be able to, quickly find it and upload it to the system, or give them hard copies of it. So I can't express enough how important it is to make sure that all of your documents, your filing, and you have a filing system in place that's organized, and where everything is. an audit it's time consuming. They ask for a lot of documents, a lot of supporting documentation and information. That's their role, that's their job. So whenever, we've been doing this for, I don't know how many years, but we welcome them, into our office. We have a separate office where they can work out of, and anything they ask for, we provide. As soon as possible. And that's one of the things that they appreciated about us, because they have stated to us that not a lot of agencies are welcoming as we are. And when they ask for information, they have to ask for it more than once. It's not given to them in a timely manner. So, work with your auditors. So that's all, I wanted to add to that.
Any questions, comments, feedback? All right, let's go to this idea of technology. And Jolie, you've worked with me for a few years now. Would you say I think about technology for our staff?
So for technology, we invest in technology because we want to make sure that staff have the right tools in order to do their jobs. So we are really, really big on technology. We have been very fortunate that we have received, grants throughout the years specifically for technology. So we are able to provide, decent technology to staff members, whether it's, personal computer, laptop, desktop, smartphones, cameras for now, the virtual workplace, the shared drive system we've been using for years. We all have desk phones. We're all under the same system for all of our locations through our desk phones. So it's just a matter of dialing an extension and we're connected. We just hired an IT specialist in 2019. So we assessed the need of our agency. And I went to Phil and I said, Phil, it's time for a technology person, because it was to the point where we grew so quickly. I couldn't keep up with it. My coworker Tammy couldn't keep up with technology either. And we were like, we need a person dedicated just for technology. And we were able to do that. And then managing the various digital platforms, right? That has grown as well throughout the years. Who's going to manage our website, all of our social media, podcasts, videos, and so on. And that's actually an area that we're looking into right now, and we're assessing the need in that area as well.
I believe that we really want to give our coaches and everyone the latest in technology tools. How many times we go to a workshop provided by the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, and we are currently working, I believe, on our 4th round of technology funding and a strategic technology planning grant. So over the years, I have seen many nonprofits really skimp on technology and been using equipment that's 10, 15, 20 years old, and just delays all their processes and makes them incredibly inefficient. And I don't know why we would do that. If we are recovery and addiction is certainly, they're using technology, we have to maintain it, even though we're a nonprofit. And it's just a question of budgeting it and making it a priority. Questions or thoughts about that? And then we'll get into the last slide for the day. All right, Stacy, let's roll to the next one. Now, we went back and forth a little bit, and we just wanted to give you an idea of some of the data systems and the software that we utilize here. And each one of these are pretty big deals, and they're telephone recovery support. It's a version of a customer relations management software. We use the same thing for emergency department. We have a scheduling tool, Humanity. We have volunteer management. We built kind of our own recovery community center visitor tracking and activity tracking. We have Bamboo HR for employment for our employees. ProTracks for training, and we have a bunch for different financial softwares. And these all provide data and reports and systems and need people to oversee. But this is also a key part of our infrastructure, which makes us work as an organization. And we need to pay attention to it. It needs to be healthy. And we also need to all understand, as you've all heard, that you have to put excellent data in order to get excellent data out. So you probably heard the opposite. But any questions about what we're talking about, data systems or all of that? Yeah, manage emails and newsletters. We didn't even include that, Constant Contact. And all our email system is on Outlook, but that's personal email. But to do the mass emails, we use Constant Contact. Did I miss anything with that, Jolie?
No, I think you got it. And I think the important thing is just to, make sure whatever data system you implement, that it works for your agency.
Mhm.
So, make sure there's a need for it and make sure that it even gets tailored to your needs. Because a lot of these databases that we have, they have been tailored to fit our needs and what we need tracked.
Also, we worked with the Hartford Foundation consultant, and she talked about being attracted to the shiny object. And just because it looks good and looks cool but does it really work for what you need? And is it a good fit? And the other question is, I forgot what the other question is. So anyway, just make sure that you have it right sized. Oh, the other part was, if something becomes cumbersome and doesn't work well anymore, figure out a way to streamline that process. And Jolie, over the years, has we've switched from our volunteer management system. We went from, what was the one before Better Impact?
GiftWorks.
Yeah, GiftWorks to Better Impact because it fit our needs better. We went from SurveyMonkey to ProTracks or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but we're willing to adapt and move when we need to, and make sure we always keep that in mind. Joanna, I'm going to ask you to come on and so we can talk about this. What is it you would like to learn more about telephone recovery support?
Sorry about that. I was eating and I didn't want to. I want to share my food.
I gotcha.
So my question about the telephone recovery support, it says version of a CRM software, is that we use Nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
We looked at HubSpot because HubSpot is HIPAA compliant, and we work with RCOs and hospital systems and addiction treatment places. So we need to be able to make certain that we meet all of those HIPAA requirements. So my question is telephone recovery support an actual CRM software, or is it the hotline itself that you refer to?
So telephone recovery support is where our volunteers call and check in on a person's recovery from our recovery community centers. And we call roughly, last I knew, around 400 people a week in Connecticut, might be a little more now. And we've been doing it for years and years. So we adapted, probably both, adapted it was called Call Pro, which was a sales tracking software. And I think it got sold. And if Rebecca was still on, she's kind of the guru that worked with Call Pro to modify that to track, our people and what the results of those calls were.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
Oh yeah, and we didn't we have yet to worry about HIPAA requirements because we're not exchanging any medical information. And the recovery is the one that's offering anything to us. So there's no charts or no medical information. So we feel, and our attorneys have advised us, our attorney back in the day advised it's not really a HIPAA concern whatsoever.
Oh, well, that's even better.
Well, yeah, I think we get a little concerned because, you know, you hear those two words together, if HIPAA is even a word, but HIPAA violation. Oh, no. Sounds bad, right? But what is it?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look into it, it's not nearly as, it's not much of a barrier as we often make it out to be.
Okay.
But always check with an attorney first. I'm not an attorney. And insurances too. Insurances would help with that too, because, you know, yeah. What are you laughing about? And you can't laugh with that cute picture of yours on. You have to like be on camera.
Oh, sorry. I didn't even realize I wasn't muted.
Oh, nice.
I just, because I'm like, typical Phil, wait, make sure you check with your lawyer and your
Yeah.
insurance company.
That's just because this is being recorded. You know, you have to like just cover all your bases.
Thank you very much for answering that question.
Oh, sure. And then does anybody else, we'll go to the last slide, and does it just is a slide if anybody has any comments, questions, or feedback for either Jolie or myself. All right, seeing that there's none, Jolie, you want to wrap it up for us? Any final thoughts?
No, I mean, this was fun. I want to thank you guys for joining us, for spilling the tea. And I hope you found it informative. And Phil shared my email address on the chat. So if you want to reach out to me with any questions or feedback, feel free to email me. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you both.
Guys.